of Tefillin of Rabbenu Tam and Rashi. And so this topic has several approaches to it. So we have to understand every approach in order to understand the whole picture over here, because the picture is quite large and broad. Yeah. So let's try to understand. First of all, right, what is the difference between the Tefillin of Rashi and Rabbenu Tam? There's only one difference basically, right, which is the order of the parshiot, which are written there, right? So to make you understand what that means, is that in the mezuzah, right, for instance, there's two parshiot, right? What does that mean? Shema and Vehaya.
Right.
Kriyat Shema, two paragraphs of Kriyat Shema. That's what you have in the mezuzah, right? So Tefillin has those two and also two more, right? Which one is that? Kadesh li kol bechor, this parsha, and then Ve'aya ki v'yacha, right? El Aretz Kanani. These two parshiot it has. So,
in addition,
right. So altogether, the Tefillin has four. What's the order? According to Rashi, the order is first Shema and then Ve'aya, like in the Kriyat Shema, like we have in the Mezuzah. Same thing, right? But here we're also adding Vaydaber, right? Kadesh li kol bechor. That's the third one. Number 4, Ve'aya ki v'yacha el Aretz Kanani. That's number 4, right? These are the four parshiot that we have in the Tefillin, in this particular order, according to Rashi. According to Rabbenu Tam, how is it structured? A little bit just the opposite. What does that mean? That everybody agrees that you do first Shema and then Ve'aya. No argument there. But according to Rabbenu Tam, what you gotta do is put this one after the third one, right? Ve'aya ki v'yacha, and then this one fourth. So it just switched. Basically, these two parshiot and Rabbenu Tam are switched.
right?
Okay, so that's why they call it, right? There's a special term for this, right? Havayot be'emtza. You know what that means? That each one of these chapters, the second chapter of the Shema, Vehaya, and this one is also Vehaya. So both of them are Vehaya. So we say, right, in Rabbenu Tam, we put those two Vehaya together, one next to the other.
Right.
And then comes this one last. Mm-hmm. So that's Rabbenu Tam. So this is the only difference, by the way, between Rabbenu Tam and Rashi. This is the basic idea. There's also little things, other things, but that's the basic idea. So what difference does that make to me, by the way? And how is it that there's two opinions going on here? How is it? What, don't we have a tradition in Talmud? Don't we have a tradition from Moshe Rabbenu? How is it that we have this confusion? All of a sudden, we don't even know how to do the Tefillin properly. This one says like this one says like that, right?
Right.
And you know that Rabbenu Tam was a grandson of Rashi, basically. Mm-hmm. So we're talking, right, that this was basically one family. Rashi was the grandpa. Rabbenu Tam was, they say, right, he was sitting in his lap. And then all of a sudden, right, when Rashi was wearing Tefillin, it says Rabbenu Tam took that Tefillin and threw it on the floor. So Rashi took that as a sign. He said, wow, this one's going to argue about on the Tefillin with me. Mm. That's what happened, right? But I mean, it's an interesting idea, but you think what? That the whole argument about this is based on a grandson and a grandfather having some kind of argument, Can you imagine? This is like the whole thing. Oh yeah, because the grandpa argued with the grandson, Come on, give me a break, It's not because of that. So then what's the story? I mean, it should be something written somewhere in the Talmud, in the Zohar, or whatever, Bavli, Yerushalmi, it should be written somewhere to tell you what's the order of the Tefillin. So this is a very strange thing, right? And all of a sudden you have two opinions over here, Rabbenu Tam and Rashi, blah, blah, blah. So, all very strange, this stuff. Mm-hmm. So how does it really work? Right? The way it works is like this, in terms of history, right? History-wise. As we said, right, in Talmud, we don't have any indication which one is the halakha. This way or that way. We don't have any indication over there. In the Yerushalmi, we do have actually, right? The Yerushalmi writes like Rabbenu Tam. Interesting, right? But then in the Zohar, you find like Rashi. So what does that mean? That this machloket, right, is way much older, way before Rashi and way before Rabbenu Tam, right? It just happens to be that, they called it on their names because they're the famous commentators on the Talmud. So that's why they called it on their names. But it doesn't mean that they're the ones who made this dispute. They're not the ones who made it. Right. This was way before their time. from the time of according to as we're going to see, right? It's really from the time of Moshe Rabbenu. This whole thing. So what does that mean, Rabotai? It means that this machloket has been around for the longest time. And by the way, there's also all kinds of issues that they say that they found, old pairs of tefillin from the old days, from the temple times, and they found like Rabbenu Tam, and they found like this, and they found like that, So they want to prove from there that that's the right one. You see from the history, right? So the truth is, by the way, there's really no proof from that. Why? Because it could be that there was both of them there, So it doesn't really mean just because they had one, it doesn't necessarily mean that they didn't have the other.
Right.
Whatever. So anyway, the point is, right, that what happened in history was like this, that the Gaonim, who were the commentators on, the poskim, the halachic authorities, they were the ones who were after the Amoraim, right? So the Amoraim were until the year, 500-600, and then what happened was the Gaonim came after that. So the Gaonim, when they came out and wrote and lived their lives and whatever they did, the Gaonim were actually, according to the historical, know-how and what they write, they were all putting on basically the Tefillin of Rabbenu Tam. They were not putting Rashi, according to a simple understanding of this whole thing. So what does that mean? That they held that the halacha was like Rabbenu Tam, even though they were before Rabbenu Tam, right? As we said, right, it's not really dependent on Rabbenu Tam, this whole thing. He's named after his name, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he's the one who made this whole thing. So the Gaonim were putting only Rabbenu Tam. So what does that mean? That they felt that was a halacha. They had a tradition. By the way, they say, right, that the words of the Gaonim are divrei Kabbalah. You know what that means? That means that they're tradition. They're not based on logic or, deduction or things like this. Right. They are based on what? On tradition. They have a tradition. From where is the tradition of the Gaonim? It comes from the schools, right, of the yeshivot that were in Babel, in Iraq, which were the schools that they learned Talmud over there. The big, great Talmudical rabbis were all there.
Right.
So what we're saying is that all that tradition that they had, the Gaonim, came from the Talmudical rabbis.
Right.
They say, by the way, that they were learning in the same buildings as they were learning. In other words, those yeshivot, can you imagine? They went all the time, it was like a tradition, from generation to generation, it was passed on. So what that means is that the Gaonim had a very clear tradition from the Talmud about all the things that we need to know. So their words are very, 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 very authoritative.
Higher than that.
Right. That's why the Rosh says, right? The Rosh, one of the great Rishonim, he says, Lo cholkim al Gaon. What does that mean? You're not allowed to argue on a Gaon. What are you arguing on? What? You're trying to because of you think so? What? Who cares what you think? They have a tradition. What are you trying to, you're trying to say the tradition of the Talmud? What?
Tanaim, right?
Yeah. So what kind of thing is this, The Amoraim, basically, right? Who were in Babel, in Iraq. So, you cannot do that. So, you see from there, by the way, that the Gaonim held that apparently the halacha was like Rabbenu Tam. And they had tradition like that. It wasn't because of their intellectual prowess, anything like that. They got it from generation to generation, from Talmud, times of Talmud. So that's a very strong indication, by the way, that Rabbenu Tam is right.
Sure.
That's very clear. Otherwise, how is it all these generations were doing like him? Right? All these things. So then, what about the issue of Rashi, right? So Rashi, the truth is, the Tefillin of Rashi came more into use after the period of the Gaonim. What does that mean? That the Rambam was asked this question, by the way. When the Rambam was alive, they asked him the question. The question was, who was right? Rabbenu Tam or Rashi? Which one is right? Not because of the names, but the order of the parshiot, right? So they asked the Rambam what it was. So he says, I'm going to look into this. He looked into it. He studied it. He didn't want to just give an answer like that, like a machine gun. He wanted to research.
Sure.
Because it wasn't so clear from the Talmud what's halacha.
Right.
So he went and he researched it, he looked into it, and his conclusion was the halacha is like Rashi. So what happened was that he made like a big revolution because of that, the Rambam. Mm-hmm. After that, what happened was that they started saying, oh, wow,
But how can you argue against the Gaonim?
Because, so that's a very good question. So the whole point is like this, right? That regarding this question, these Rishonim, especially the earlier ones, they had the power to argue on the Geonim because they were very wise.
The Rosh was the son of the Tur.
Yes.
The Tur was on the same level as Rambam.
The opposite, right? The Tur was the son of the Rosh.
I'm sorry. The Rosh and the Rambam have similar holding halacha. They have similar weight.
Yeah, that's right. But when it comes to the earlier Rishonim, those are the ones who usually argue with the Geonim. We're talking about the Rambam. We're talking about the Rif.
By
right?
default,
We're talking about
with the Amoraim.
Yeah, you could say that. You could say that. Yeah, it's possible to say such a thing like that.
How can you do it?
So how can you do it? So you know what it is? What they did basically was they didn't have a tradition so strong like the Geonim. As we said, right? The Geonim had a much stronger tradition.
Right.
So they were more relying on their understanding of the Talmud, the depth of the understanding, the Rishonim.
Okay.
Understand? They were more relying on that. What they were doing is they were bringing sources from the Talmud against the Geonim that seemed to argue with the Geonim. You understand? Wow. So this is a very deep. This is a very big stuff. You gotta have big shoulders for this kind of thing. You know what I mean? This is not simple stuff. So these people were very big, and they had the power to argue with the Geonim. And by the way, it happens also not a few times, many times, that we paskin like the Rishonim over the Geonim. You understand? Why? Because they had the power to argue with them, and sometimes the consensus goes like them. There's also another thing, by the way, which is it sounds like really like a little bit imbalanced, right? But
very much.
You know what it is? There's also a very nice book by Rabbi Yitzchak Hutner. He says, right, one of the Rashi was in recent times.
Right.
He says something interesting, right? That when it comes to these things, regarding these disputes between these big rabbis, right, and it's going throughout the generations. So what he writes is like this. He says that it really happens to also depend on the generation. What does that mean? That all these opinions are all the words of living God.
Right.
Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chaim. So what does that mean? The only question is, who do we paskin like? In other words, practically speaking, who do we go like? They're all true, right? All these opinions are true. That's not the issue whether they're true or not. So what does that mean? Because we say, right, all these opinions are true, but there's also a bechina of the door. You know what that means? It's like a quality of the generation. In other words, there are certain generations that deserve this opinion.
I see.
It's more fitting for them to do like this, right, because of their spiritual nature.
Sure.
And there are other generations which are fitting for them to do just the opposite, right? The other way.
Sure.
So these opinions can vary from generation to generation because of the quality of the generation.
So the Rabbenu Tam generation was a stronger generation according to what you're saying. The Rabbenu Tam generation was a much...
No, what we're saying is like this, right? That it just happens to be that according to the quality of the generation, they need a different kind of halacha. They need a different kind of you understand?
And how do these...
They're all true, these things.
How do the big rabbis come to this conclusion? Is Ruach HaKodesh or...
No, there's no right Ruach HaKodesh and halacha. Halacha is only determined by sources and deduction and things like this, right?
How can you deduce the generation needs that and not that?
So what's the story? What they do is like this, right? They don't care about the generation. They're not thinking about that. What they're doing is they're researching the Talmud. They're researching the sources that we have, from the Chazal, all these things. And according to their conclusion from all the things that they read, as they studied, that's the way it should be. But who put this into their head? Hashem put this into their head. You understand? Why? Because the quality of the generation is like that. So therefore they come up with this conclusion, which is, the quality of the generation. So this is like a very deep kind of thing, whatever. But this is the way it works with Torah, by the way. Okay. The Torah is not like a standard, like one-sided kind of thing. There's different sizes to the Torah. There's different faces to the Torah.
Right.
And they're all true. Okay. But the point is, right, that you have to know how to play these games. You have to know how to make these deductions. And you have to manipulate all these sources in order to come up with the proper conclusion. You have to have skills for that, right? You need special skills and special fear of God also. You have to be God-fearing person, very, very skilled, very experienced for a long time, and so forth and so on.
Right.
So all these things, and you have to be ordained, whatever. Most people who did these kinds of things were ordained also to do it, whatever. But the point is that now all of a sudden, right after the Rambam moved into the picture, and on this other side we had Rashi.
Right.
So we have now two big rabbis of those generations who are all of a sudden saying just the opposite of what it was before.
Yeah, it's incredible.
So what happened was this caused a revolution. You understand? So what happened was that after Rashi and Rambam decided to do it the other way, then followed suit also more Rishonim, right? like the Rashba, the Ritva,
Right.
the Meiri. There's all right. A lot of the Rishonim came out and said also like them. So what does that mean? All of a sudden, the opinion of the Gaonim got drowned out. Swept into the sea, disappeared. Disappeared into thin air. Like it doesn't exist anymore. Can you imagine this? What happened? So what happened was that the period of the Rishonim was about 400 years, 500 years. The period of the Rishonim. Gaonim also was about the same, 400 years and so forth, so on and so on. So what happened was that the Gaonim period was doing like Rabbenu Tam, and then Rishonim were doing mostly like Rashi, most of them, in most places. So you see, right, that basically the halacha was switched. That's what happened.
Yeah,
it switched. Yeah, it changed. The halacha changed. So, but as we said, right, there's sources for both of these sides. Very clear sources in the Chazal, in the Poskim, and the authorities, and so forth, and so on. Right. So now, what does that mean for us, right? So comes now Maran Shulchan Aruch, right? The Maran, he had to now write. His job was to unite all these opinions into one cohesive halacha. Right. That was his job. So what did he do, Maran? Maran saw that there's a machloket between this side and that side. So what he said was, first of all, the minhag at that time, right, custom, was like Rashi, as we said, right? Because this was already the time of the Rishonim, and a little bit after that, right? On the border of the time of the Rishonim, Maran was the first Acharon, the first generation Acharonim. That's what he was. So what happened was that Maran said the custom is like Rashi. But even though he said the custom is like Rashi, what he said was, but a God-fearing person should also put Rabbenu Tam.
Right, because you're wiping out the opinion of the Gaonim.
Why is that, by the way? Yeah, you're right. That's true. But I want to elaborate a little bit more, right? The reason he said that is because there's basically one idea here, which usually is not in most cases of halacha. In most cases of halacha, there is some kind of a conclusion there. In other words, a way to reach a conclusion in the halacha. But here there is really no conclusion at all. What does that mean? That we don't have really a clear tradition either way. This one was being done for several hundred years. This one was being done for several hundred years. There's a precedent. There's sources also. We have the Zohar. We have the Talmud Yerushalmi. This way, that way. We have all these things. So who can now come and say, I know which one is right. Who are you to say who's right? We have all these sources, and you want to come in now and decide between them. How can you decide between this group and that group, the Gaonim and the Rishonim? We're going to decide. We cannot do that. So then what's in conclusion? Conclusion is that since there's no clear halacha regarding this, so therefore comes Maran and says you got to do both if you're a God-fearing person. If you're a God-fearing person, you got to do both. Because what you want to go to Shamayim, you want to go to the heavens right after your 120th year, and what are they going to tell you? Oh, you never put tefillin in your life. Thank you. I did. Oh, yeah, but you were putting the wrong order. Sorry. What are you going to do? What are you going to tell them?
So right now, somebody puts Rashi every single day. They have to put Rabbenu Tam also.
So we're going to discuss that right in the end. We're going to get to the practical halacha, what to do. But so I get to first to talk about the theory a little, right?
Right, sure.
So he says like this, right? Says Maran, a God-fearing person should put both. So there's two ways to do this, right? One after the other, or both of them together. So says Maran, the preferred way is to put both of them together.
Oh wow! Okay.
Right? But if you cannot for some reason, right? So then put one after the other. That's what he says, right? This is the halacha in the Danielov Shulchan Aruch. There's also another thing Maran says after that, right? This is on Siman Lamed Daled, 34, chapter 34, right? What does he say over there? The Maran, he also says another thing. He says that all the things that I told you to put Rabbenu Tam and Rashi, I meant for a person who's known to be very God-fearing and holy, somebody like that.
Right.
A special person of the generation. A person like that can do that, but as somebody who's just considered to be like a regular guy, average Joe, he doesn't have to get involved with that stuff. Just put Rashi, that's it. The minhag is like Rashi. That's it. No, don't have to be so precise about that. So why does Maran say that, right? The reason he says that is because since in his generation most people did not put two tefillin, it didn't exist at that time.
Right.
So what he was saying is that if you do put two, you look like you're being a show-off.
Sure.
Right? What do we call that in halacha? Yuhara, right? What does that mean? It means gava, it means arrogance. You're being like, I'm holier than everybody else. I put two tefillin, So you cannot do that If you're just an average Jew,
can you do it at home?
yeah, that's for sure. So you cannot do that when you're average. What does that mean? We cannot do that. You cannot do it in public. That's what we're talking about, right? So when you go to shul and you put on two tefillin, they're gonna see, oh, this guy, he thinks he's holier than everybody else.
What if you pray with a minyan where everybody does that?
That's fine. Yeah, that's fine. Sure, that's fine. But in those days, in times of Maran, they were not doing that.
Sure.
So therefore, he said, Maran, you can only do this if you're like a very, very holy person. Like you're like Baba Sali, one of these kind of people. A very holy man, somebody who's known for his holiness, and that's kind of that. So most of us are not like that. So you would think, right, that we're not involved in this game at all. So we have no business with that.
But now the fear
so the truth is, right, that I'm sorry, what was it?
The fear comes in that if you go to heaven in 120 years, they're going to say you never put people in your life.
Right, but since halakha was decided, that's halakha. That's halakha. What can you do?
Okay.
So now, what's the bottom line? You would think we should do like Maran says, but what happened was that as time went along, there was also other things which were introduced. Right? What are we talking about? Even in that generation itself, there also came another opinion that came up here, right? Besides Maran. Who was this? The opinion of the Arizal, right?
Okay.
Now they claim, right, the Mekubalim, some of the Mekubalim, they claim that the Arizal got this from Eliyahu Navi, this information. It wasn't just something he made up from his own mind, right? So what does the Arizal say? The Arizal says that Moshe Rabbeinu actually was putting two tefillin, right? It wasn't even one. And he also claims that was being done throughout history, like for a long time, until the time of the Rishonim. That's what they're claiming, basically. So now the question is, right, where do they get this stuff, this information from? It certainly is not written anywhere in the sources that we have. Nowhere. Okay, so they say got it from Eliyahu Navi. I don't know. What can I tell you?
Are there interesting schools? The school of Mekubalim?
I'm sorry?
Are there halachot that the Mekubalim do that we do not do?
Yeah, there's all kinds of things. Hasidut, it's Hasidut, it's not halachot, right?
How can they go against the basis of logic that we have?
So what they're saying is that I got it from Eliyahu Navi. What do you want from me? What? Eliyahu Navi told me. What?
What kind of comment is that? You cannot derive halacha from prophecy.
Oh, okay. We're going to talk about that also, right? We're talking about that. It's a very good point. So what he's saying is like this, right? Comes and tells you, the Arizal, is that to do the mitzvah properly, you got to put both of them together.
I see. And
that really is the mitzvah, right? According to his Kabbalistic, calculations, whatever. His Kabbalistic thinking.
Special man.
Yeah, a very special man. So he says you have to do both of them together.
Even for the layman.
Yeah, if you don't do that, you basically have not done the mitzvah of tefillin.
Wow.
You've never done it. That's what he says. Yeah. So, right? So now, thing is like this, right? That even though the Arizal says this, and by the way, this is also brought down in the Ben Ish Chai. Right? He brings down the Arizal and also other sources to talk about this. And he also claims like this, right? The Ben Ish Chai. That if you don't put it like this, you've never done tefillin in your life, basically. That's what he's telling you, right? And he says that he even gives like a very big leniency over here to do it in a certain way. I'm going to explain to you what that is, but before we get to that, I want to say also that even though the Arizal had this opinion, apparently this was, from Eliyahu Navi, I don't know, I cannot tell you yes or no. But what we're saying is like this, right? That most of the poskim, Rishonim, Geonim, most of the sources that we have, all the sources that we have, nobody says anywhere that you have to put two tefillin together. No such a thing like that. We don't even find it in the Zohar, by the way, this thing. We don't find it. But there is actually an allusion to it a little bit. Allusion, but not really like a real source. What's the allusion? It says in the Talmud, right, Masechet Eruvin, that there's enough room on the head and arm for two tefillin. There's enough room for two. It doesn't say you should put two, but there's enough room for two.
On the head itself.
Right, or also on the arm.
Okay.
Yeah. It's kind of like a little of a hint, maybe, whatever. I don't know. If you want to call it a hint, I don't know.
So whatever.
That's not really enough to to prove something.
But what's the weight here? Like, what do we do today?
I'll explain to you. So comes now, right? The Arizal says what he said, but the truth is, right? His words are against basically everything that we have: Talmud, Rishonim, right? Shulchan Aruch, Poskim. It's against everything that we have. It's against. Can you imagine something like this?
How can you make a claim like that if it's against everything that we have?
Eliyahu Navi, what can I tell you? Talk to Eliyahu Navi. You had a conversation with him, whatever. So now, what does this mean? Like practically speaking, right? Bottom line, what does this mean? So there's also, by the way, before we get to the bottom line, there's also the opinion of the Gra.
What's the Gra say?
So the Gra, right, was an interesting character, right? He was a person who had his own opinions, and he stuck by them until the end, right? No matter what, right? He was very strong, very, very strong-minded person.
Did he have bases in Talmud?
So, yeah, obviously. So, what he did was like this, right? He only put Tefillin Of Rashi, the Gra. Okay. So they came and asked him, they said, Rabbi, why don't you put Rabbenu Tam? What, you didn't see what says in Shulchan Aruch, the Arizal, right, this, that, all that kind of stuff? Well, what's with you? You're not a Kabbalist? You're not a Mekuval? Right. They asked him, what's going on with you? So he said, he says, there's no need to do that. To explain to people, right? There's no need to put two tefillin, this one, whether it's together or even one after the other.
Right.
They told him why. So they said, well, Rabbenu Tam and Rashi is a machloket. It's a dispute.
Right.
So he says, we are, the custom is now to do like Rashi. So he says, therefore, if you would want to put tefillin for all the opinions that there are about tefillin, how to do tefillin properly, there's all kinds of other disputes also in tefillin. Sure. Not only this issue, there's also others. How to do this, how to do that, how to tie them, how to do the heads, how to do the rosh, how to do the yad, how to do all these things. There's a lot of disputes about a lot of things. So comes Galvina, with his genius, and it says this, if you're going to put every type of tefillin according to all the disputes, you have to put 64 pairs of tefillin. That's what he says every day. So what do you want me to do? Put 64 tefillin every day? That's what you want me to do? So why should I only be worried about this machloket, Rabbenu Tam and Rashi, and not worry about all the others? What's the difference between this and that? Right. So therefore he claimed, right, that what? Because of that, there's no need to put both. Halacha like Rashi. Nowadays, we go like Rashi. That was his claim. So he never put Rabbenu Tam. The Gamavina. And this is, by the way, until this day, probably one of the biggest reasons why the Lithuanian Jews, they don't put most of them. Most of them don't put Rabbenu Tam. You know what I mean? Even the ones who are older and wiser, the rabbis, the scholars, they don't put it either.
Who today puts Rabbenu Tam?
Who puts it, right? So who puts it? Basically, the Sephardim do it more than everybody else. I know. And also the Hasidim also do a lot.
I know who have the tefillin with 2 boxes here and 2 boxes here.
Right, that's it, yeah. So now, you understand there's all kinds of ways to look at this whole thing. Mm-hmm. There's also another thing, by the way, that according to the Poskim, and what we see in the Rishonim and the Shulchan Aruch, you know what they say? That because we're only supposed to put 1 tefillin, according to all the sources that we have, we don't see anywhere where you have to put 2 tefillin.
Right.
Whether it's a Zohar, whether it's Midrash, whether it's Talmud, whether it's any other source whatsoever, right? So therefore they say, right, if you want to put both of them and be machmir, you want to be stringent, so what you have to do is what? You have to be bechaden, your intention has to be like this, right? I don't know which one is halacha. So whichever one it is, I'll fulfill the mitzvah with that one. And the other one is just like I'm putting on straps, just having some fun. In other words, you shouldn't have the intention that both of them are the mitzvah, only one of them.
So you do only one kavanah?
You know what I'm saying? In other words, you put both, but you think only one of them is true, and whichever one it is, you know God. So you count me that one. The other one is just like we're playing with leather. We're playing with some leather straps. That's what it says now in all the places in Halakha. Oh, okay. So this is against what it says in the Arizal, right? In the Ben Ish Chai. Why? Because according to them, you have to put both of them. So therefore, there is no such a thing like that. Only one of them, and not the other. I don't know which one. This all doesn't apply. But comes right, Moreno Rabbenu, Ravadia, in his Tshuva Yechavedat. He says over there that we cannot go like the Ben Ish Chai and the Arizal here. We cannot do like that. We cannot do it the way they say.
Not enough weight.
Why is that? So he says, right, this is against everything that we have, all the sources that we have. Talmud, this, Zohar, this, all the Yerushalmi, Bavli. It's against the Rishonim, it's against the Shulchan Aruch, it's against everything. The Ramah, everything. So how can we now, right, go against all these sources and do like the Arizal? This is like, we have also, by the way, several poskim, including the Redvaz, and the Rav Yaakov Emdin and many other poskim, Rav Yaakov El Ghazi also, right? Who said that what? When there's a machloket, when there's a dispute between the Kabbalah and the Halakha, we'll go like the Halakha. Absolutely. This is the general rule. So the rabbi is trying to tell you, right, that what? How can it be that we should do like the Kabbalah, which is really there's no source for this anywhere, even the Zohar doesn't say so, and go against all the poskim and all the sources that we have, all the sources from the sages, all the sources from the Talmud, everything. How can we do that? So the rabbi says there's no way in the world that a person should do like the opinion of the Ben Ish Chai or the opinion of the Arizal. So therefore the rabbi says, right, just like the Shulchan Aruch, he said what a person should do is that what? When he puts on these two tefillin, his kavanah should be not that they're both tefillin. One of them is a game. It's like some kind of Scrabble, playing Scrabble. That's what you're doing with this thing. It's nothing. Playing with a toy. That's what you... so not only that, right? If you have kavanah that they're both tefillin, you're over on a prohibition. You're going over a prohibition. You know what this? Baal Tosif. You're adding a mitzvah to the Torah, which doesn't exist. Because the Torah said one tefillin. You're saying, no, there's two tefillin. Who told you there's two tefillin? Where does it say that?
It's heretical.
Understand? Yeah, somewhat, whatever. So therefore the rabbi says that we should not do like the Ben Ish Chai. Also the Ben Ish Chai says another interesting thing, right? Which is what? He says the Ben Ish Chai that what? That we have an issue, by the way, with the size of the tefillin and the size of the arm and the head. What does that mean? As we said, right, the Gemara in Eruvin says there's place enough on the head, on the arm, for two tefillin, right? But they have to be two small tefillin in order to do that. Why is that? Because altogether, right, if you measure how much we have here, room, and on the head, it's basically it should be no more than 8 centimeters, the whole thing. So there have to be 2 4-centimeter tefillin, very small ones, right? Tiny ones. And they are, by the way, made like that size. Okay? But we'll explain to you why it's a little bit of a problem anyway. It could be a great problem also. The problem is like this, right? That, as we said, first of all, that since the Talmud tells us that we have room enough for 2 tefillin, so you may think, I can put 2 tefillin together, and I can do also like the preferred way. This is the preferred way according to the Shulchan Aruch, to put them together. But the problem is like this, right? That sometimes, especially in our days, that these tefillin that we have, they're much bigger. They're not the ones who make tefillin today, the bakers, the producers. They're not used to making small tefillin. There are some companies that do that, but it's like something a little specialty.
Right.
There's also another problem there, right? Which is what? When you make them small, they also turn out to be much weaker, much more flimsy, and also they can get the
corners.
Not the corners, but what I'm saying is, right, that the writing which is in there, right, these parchments that we put in there, they also have to be made very, very small. That means you have to write tiny, like an ant. You have to write like ant letters. So what does that mean? Since the scribes don't know how to write like that, so small like that, they're not expert in this. So therefore, your tefillin could not turn out to be pasul. It could not to be not kosher because of that, right? You want it to be arizal, but it turned out that you haven't even done the tefillin. You understand? Sometimes, a person goes too far. Al tiyat tzaddik Rabbi. That's what Shlomo Melech said, right? Al tiyat tzaddik Rabbi. Don't be too much of a tzaddik. When you start to go too far, sometimes you can wind up with zero. You think you're doing everything the kosher way, the Kabbalistic way, but then you can wind up with a big fat zero instead. So therefore, right, there's a big concern about that. What does that mean? That the halacha says like this, right? That the tefillin of the arm has to be put on the bicep, the muscle. That's where it has to be. But according to the Shulchan Aruch and most poskim, and according to the Ramah also, it has to be on the lower part of the bicep, lower half of the bicep. The upper part of the bicep is not kosher, according to them. So what does that mean? Even if a little bit part of the tefillin goes over there, up there, not kosher. So what does that mean? That if a person is putting 2 tefillin, he's have a pretty good chance that that part is going to be, he's not going to do this mitzvah properly.
You have to do it from the lower part of the bicep?
Right, until half of the bicep.
Not up here.
About 8 centimeters, right? That's all. Yeah, right. Exactly. Once you're past the half point, the apex of the right. Bicep, that's it. Right, you're going to the other side. It starts to descend like a mountain. That's right. No good. According to these poskim, right? So it comes now. So what is that? Yeah, I'm sorry.
People who put the film that high, it's pasul.
It's pasul. Yeah, according to this opinion, right?
Wow.
Now, what does that mean? Right, that a person who puts 2 tefillin is very likely to get into this problem.
Right.
Because today they're not so small; they're large.
What if you can get them that small?
So now, as we said, right, if you make them that small, there's also issue because of these, they're flimsy and they're not written properly, and because they have to be also made very thin. The parchments, they could crack also All kinds of issues. If they crack, that means the letter could crack. It's not kosher anymore. All kinds of issues like that. So therefore, right, because of all these considerations, the Rabbi told us, Maran, that we shouldn't do like this to make these small tefillin. Even if you can make them really, really tiny, but we have all kinds of issues now that they might not even be kosher, these things, because of all these reasons. So therefore, his suggestion, one of the suggestions, his instructions was to not to do it this way. In this generation, he felt that it wasn't possible to do it this way. I mean, it's possible, but very, very unlikely. And most people who are going to do it are probably going to fail because of all these things.
Sure.
So, what does that mean? Comes now Ben Ish Chai and says a big chidush over here, right? Something which is very hard to believe. He says to Ben Ish Chai that even if your tefillin are a little bit large, on the large side, he says you should still put both of them together, even though it's going above that area. Can you imagine? He says like that. So how can he say such a thing like that? So he comes and says, you know what? He says he wants to go like the Gra. The Gra says that all the bicep is okay. Understand?
Okay.
So he says, rely on the Gra and do like the Arizal. You know what I mean?
Right. Put
both together. That's the instructions of the Ben Ish Chai. That's what it says in the book Ben Ish Chai. But the Rabbi, Shalom, he's very much against this whole thing. Why is that? Because you cannot abandon the opinion of the Shulchan Aruch and all the Rishonim, most of the Rishonim, and also the Ramah, and go like the Gra, one against the whole world?
Right, it doesn't work.
You understand? So therefore comes the Rabbi and says, how can you do that, Just to do like the Kabbalistic way, according to the Arizal, which, by the way, even that is not clearly known that that's Kabbalah. He got it from, here. The Zohar doesn't say that.
I'm sorry.
So, yeah.
Rabbi Shaul, he should put the double tefillin.
Yeah, it's true. Many people did that. Yeah.
Are they going against all the halacha? Are they going against the Shulchan Aruch? Are they going against all the...
So, I mean, personally, you can talk about this person or that person, but, we're talking more about the theory over here right now, right? Before we get to the people, it's a different story, but... So, what happens like this, right? That it says the Ben Ish Chai, put them like that, and rely on the Gra. This is against halachic principles. Why? Because we have a principle that we go according to the majority, we go according to the Shulchan Aruch, we go according to the Rishonim, all these things. Comes Ben Ish Chai and breaks all these rules. Why? Just to do like the Arizal. Why would you want to do like the Arizal against all the other sources who don't say like that, including the Chazal themselves, the sages themselves don't say like that. So why would you want to do that? What's the rationale? So the Rabbi says this is against the rules of halacha to say such a thing like this. It's against the halachic principles.
Right. Majority,
Rishonim, Chazal, Talmud. It's against the Talmud. Talmud doesn't say that. So therefore, right, the Rabbi says this is not the way to do it. Well, so what is the way to do it? According to Rabbi Shalom, the way to do it was to buy two regular pairs of tefillin, right? One Rabbenu Tam and one Rashi, and put one after the other. That's the way he did it. And that's what the Shulchan Aruch says also, by the way. What does the Shulchan Aruch say? If you cannot do it that way, to put both of them together, so do one after the other. Right? So what does that mean? That the Shulchan Aruch itself is not concerned about the opinion of the Arizal. He may have never even heard of that, by the way. Because they were the same generation. I don't even know if he knew that stuff. So, I mean, you cannot go against all the world just because they do like the words of the Arizal. This is like going a little bit too far, A little bit too. By the way, you should know, there's also another thing interesting, right? That there are some who claim that basically all the teachings of the Arizal come from Eliyahu Navi. You know what I mean? So therefore, it's like 100%, without any argument. It's like whatever he says, that's the rule. But really, the truth is, right, came the Gra and disputed that. He said the Gra, who told you that everything the Arizal said was from Eliyahu Navi? There are some things that he got from Eliyahu Navi. There was also some things that he got from his own intellect. That he felt that way. Right. So what does that mean? That he felt that not everything that the Arizal said always comes from Eliyahu Navi. It's just his own personal opinion. So if that's the case, how can we go according to his personal opinion and go against all the Tanaim and Amoraim and everybody else, against Rishonim and everybody else? How can we do such a thing like that? Understand? This is not the way of halacha. This is not the way of formulating the halacha. This is not the way of deciding the halacha. So therefore, came the Rabbi and then he said, very smart idea, which it has to be like that. That we should do like everybody, the whole world. Who doesn't do like that? They don't do that. They don't say that. So, as we said, right, that according to this opinion, though, as we said, right, if you don't put both of them together, you never did mitzvah tefillin. But the truth is, this is like kind of ridiculous. I mean, why do I say that? Why is this is very ridiculous if you really think about it. Why? What is the Ben Ish Chai telling you, right? That all these rabbis, the Geonim, the Rishonim, they never did the mitzvah of tefillin. That's what he's saying. Come on, let's be serious. I mean, you have to have a little bit of respect for the rabbis who came before you.
Absolutely.
What is he trying to tell you, right? That all these huge rabbis, they only put on one tefillin. These big guys, those rabbis, they didn't put two. So if that's the case, they didn't do a mitzvah tefillin? All these big rabbis, what they were like? They were like chilonim. They were like secular Jews. What kind of thing is that to say, right? So I mean, it sounds, the truth is, right, that these words of the Ben Ish Chai are not acceptable according to the rules and the logic and
How can he say this?
Just not what can I tell you? The Ben Ish Chai was very pulled into these words and teachings of the Arizal. He was into that, he got pulled into that, and that's what he believed in, especially towards the end of his life. He was more into that as he got older, because he got more deeper into Kabbalah and so on and so on. So that was his way of this. That became his approach. But the truth is, right, that it's not possible to accept these words.
Of course not.
Not there's no way to accept them. And also, by the way, what the problem is like this, right? That even if you think, I'm going to be a Hasid, I'm going to be a big saint and do like that. The problem is, right, that if you do like that, according to the halakha, you're doing a sin. Why is that? Because you're thinking that both these have to be on my arm. According to halakha, it's only one of them. So therefore, you're going over the Yisur, the prohibition of Baal Tosif. You're adding a mitzvah to the Torah. 2 tefillin. Who told you to put 2 tefillin? There's only 1 tefillin. We're not sure which one it is. So therefore, comes the rabbi and says to Shalom, that a person should do like the halakha, which is what? That a person should think one of them is the real thing and the other one is just Scrabble. It's whatever it is, whatever you want to call it.
It's good to buy 2 separate ones and put 2 separate.
Exactly, that's what we do, right? Exactly. On the other hand, by the way, I must tell you that the rabbi was very particular about this, to put Tefillin of Rabbenu Tam. And he also suggested to everybody who he loved, as a student or as a friend, whatever it was, that they should everybody told everybody, right? You have to do that. Not that it's an obligation. It's not an obligation, but very, very, very proper to behave this way. To put both of them, because he used to tell us, right, like this, that if you make one day get to Shemaim, that's what they're going to tell you, right? That they have over there the yeshiva of Rabbenu Tam, they have over the yeshiva of Rashi. So he said, right, that in the yeshiva of Rabbenu Tam, they won't let you in. Why? Because they're going to say, you didn't put a tefillin, so they won't let you in there, right? So in the yeshiva of Rashi, you can go in, but over here you cannot come in, because you didn't respect Rabbenu Tam. You didn't put his tefillin. That was more like an exaggeration, or whatever. But it was to make the point that you're going to be missing something there. Up there, you're going to have to definitely going to be lacking some kind of equality. And by the way, there's also other things that that were told by the Mekubalim regarding the great qualities of Rabbenu Tam, the Tefillin of Rabbenu Tam, right? That it gives you chokhmah. It's a big segula for chokhmah, right? It's conducive to having knowledge and wisdom. Right? So therefore, a person who really wants to be a chacham, he wants to be wise in Torah, very, very recommend that he should put Rabbenu Tam. You know what I mean?
Smart.
Because when you put only one of them and not the other, you're lacking a certain quality in your intellect. You don't have the other approach, the other side.
By putting tefillin, what kind of quality what does it do for you?
It gives you a quality of holiness, a certain quality of intellect. It's because it's on your brain. It's on your head. So it's connected to the brain and the function of the brain. So therefore, since you put the tefillin on, that means you're now connected to the holiness in your intellect, so you can think the right way. To ponder the right way, to decide the right way, all these things. Okay. So truth is, right, that it's very important for a person who really wants to get to high levels of wisdom, that he should put Rabbenu Tam. But as we said, right, that the Gaon of Vilna was not concerned about this at all. He never put it. So, by the way, his claim actually was apparently a very strong claim. What he said was that I'm not going to put 64 pairs of tefillin.
Right.
So why should I put this one? What difference does it make? So the truth is, there is an answer to his question, by the way. You know what the answer is? With all due respect, right? He was a very great rabbi, But the answer is like this: that there are many machlokot. There's many differences of opinion about tefillin, how to do this, how to do that, everything. Yeah, that's true. There's 64, right, or whatever it is altogether. But the thing is, that this machloket, this dispute, is not like any other dispute. What does that mean? That there's no clear halakha over here. There's no clear decision.
Right.
Who's going to come and decide this kind of thing? Nobody can do that. So therefore, since we're absolutely not sure which one is the halakha, therefore we have to put both of them. There's no other way to, you know what I mean? Because even though the Shulchan Aruch says the minhag, the custom is like Rashi, but it doesn't mean that Rabbenu Tam is wrong. No, just the custom in that time was like that. But as we said, right, the custom in the older times was just the opposite. So that doesn't mean much, in terms of your quality, your development, your mental development. So a person who really wants to have the Chokhmah, so the Gal Levina, right, there is an answer to his question. The answer is like this, right, that here, this machloket, this dispute has really no clear conclusion. Right. So therefore, it's not like the other disputes, which have more like a clear conclusion, because we have the rules of the majority, we have the rules, all kinds of rules to make a conclusion there. But here, we have no majority, we have no nothing. There's 50 rabbis on this side, there's 50 rabbis on that side, right? There's a Talmud over here, Yerushalmi, there's a Zohar over here. Who's going to decide between these people? Nobody can do that. So therefore, the only thing we can do is just to put both of them, because we're not sure which one it is. That's the only thing. So therefore, right, due to all these things, the proper thing, right, practically speaking, is like this, right? There's different customs, by the way, also. As we said, right, in the Lithuanian world, they don't put, most people don't put Tefillin Of Rashi. They only put Rashi. Mm-hmm. So what is the proper thing to do? Rav Moshe Feinstein, there's a tshuva, right, in Igrot Moshe. He has a tshuva over there. He talks about this issue of Rabbenu Tam also. He himself, right, was Lithuanian, kind of like, more Lithuanian side. He was from Russia. So he wasn't exactly Lithuanian, but, more on that side, whatever. So Rabbeinu Moshe Feinstein, there's a tshuva where they're brought down, the Lubavitcher Rabbi asked him, right, a question. He said, he sends him a letter. He says, Kvod Harav, Rabbi, do you have Tefillin Of Rabbenu Tam? He asked him a question, So Rabbi Moshe Feinstein answered him back, sent him a letter. He says, first of all, he treated him with great respect, by the way, right? Sure. The Rabbi, he treated the Rabbi with great respect. That shows you, by the way, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein held very highly, in high regard, the Lubavitcher Rabbi. Right. And not like people, try to sell. He was just like, he was just like icon, some kind of icon, religious icon. Who? The Lubavitcher Rabbi, No. He was much more than that. Believe me, because if you see what Rabbi Moshe Feinstein said about him over there in the Igrot Moshe, mm-hmm. He calls him all these great names, the great titles, that you never find anywhere with any other rabbi. So you see that he held by him he gave him very high esteem. Sure. It has to be said, the truth has to be said.
You reviewed him.
Yeah, very much so. You can imagine how much so. So what happened was, right, that he answers him back and he says, listen, one day I used to have Rabbenu Tam, tells him. When I was in Russia, I had it, and then he says, something happened there, got lost, I don't know, whatever, So he says, now I don't put. I came to America and I left it in Russia, that thing. I never got a chance to bring it over here. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe tells him, right, sends him back. He says, you know what? He says, don't worry, I'm going to send you a pair of Rabbenu Tam. Don't worry.
That was his way.
Yeah, he was a good man. God bless him, So what happened was that he told him, don't worry about it. I have some scribes over here by me in Crown Heights. I'll take care of it. It's going to be on your desk very soon, right? So Moshe Feinstein, he says, you want to send me Rabbenu Tam? He says, fine, but only on condition that you do it according to my specifications. I'm going to tell you how to do it. If you do it like the way I say, then you can send it to me, right? So he gave him the specifications. You send it to him in the end. That's what happened, right? So why do I bring down this?
Well, he made a different style.
The tshuva. No, he had in other words, in terms of tefillin, he had his own specifications how to do tefillin properly. That
was his understanding.
Exactly how to do tefillin properly. So what happened was that because there's a lot of issues there, in tefillin. Right. There's a lot of issues. Yeah. So
not all tefillin are. There's different tyings, different elements.
Yeah, there's also Sephardi, there's Ashkenazi, there's some differences, all kinds of things. So the point is, right, that he sent it to him, and he took it because he wanted to have that. So why do I tell you that? That even, some of the Ashkenazim also, they were medakdek to do this tefillah, especially the Hasidim. In the Hasidic world, it's very common. It's very publicized and very common that they should put both, right? They put one after the other.
Sure.
That's what they do, not together.
What do we do?
Yeah. So now the question is like this, right? What was Sephardim? So the history of the Sephardim is a little bit different. What does that mean? As we said, right, that Maran.
Gentlemen, you want to close the gate?
So as we said, right, Maran himself, he wrote that only person who's very, known to be very God-fearing should put that on, not a regular guy. So came now, right, several hundred years later, the Chida and people in this generation, and they said something else. They said, listen, whatever Maran said, not to put tefillin in, unless you're very, very, very God-fearing, it doesn't apply to them anymore. Why is that? Because they came to Eretz Israel during that period, during the time of the Chida, and what they found was that most of the Jews over there, or many, many, many Jews, were doing the Rabbenu Tam. So what does that mean? That the custom changed already. That what? That in Eretz Israel, many people were putting Rabbenu Tam at that time. Right? So therefore, they came and said, you know what? If we see, right, that it's so common over here, so that rule of Maran doesn't apply anymore. Because he was talking about a generation where they don't put everybody.
Right.
But now that we have a generation that everybody puts more or less, plus minus, so that therefore, right, the rule should be that anybody can put it anytime he wants. He doesn't have to be, a special person or some kind of Baba Sali or kind of, he doesn't have to be anything like that. So therefore, right, came the Chida and said, nowadays we can put, anybody can do it, because even the Balabatim are doing it, even the regular people are doing it, right? The ones who are, making pizza and riding on the mopeds, if they're doing it, we cannot do it? What kind of thing is it, right? We have to be concerned about that? No, nothing to be concerned about.
Today we put Rashi and Rabbenu Tam.
So therefore, what happened was in Eretz Israel, the custom came in more and more and more to put Rabbenu Tam. Right? Who was in Eretz Israel at that time? It was mostly Sephardim, right? There was very, very few Ashkenazim at that time. Like you could count them on your hands. Right. You know what I'm saying? Very few. There wasn't right. Now today it's something else, but yeah, it's true. But in those times it was basically a Sephardi community over there.
Right.
So what happened was that it came in very, very strong in Eretz Israel. So until this day, by the way, the custom in Eretz Israel amongst the Sephardim that they put Rabbenu Tam, a lot of them.
No Rashi.
No, both. They put both of them. In most cases, one after the other, not together, right? So what that means is that nowadays when you go to Eretz Israel, in most shuls, you won't look very strange putting on Rabbenu Tam. You're going to look pretty normal, right. Right. So that's a big difference. Why? As we said, right? Because if it wasn't for that, the only way you could do it, as you said, right, would do it at your home, when you do it in your house.
Right.
Nobody's watching you over there. Because if you do it in the shul, so there, right, you're going to look like a hotshot, Mr. Show-off, right? Mr. Holy man,
Right.
The holy saint. So that's no good. By the way, where do we see that it's no good? Where's the source for that, right? The truth is that the Mishnah Bura and also the Beratev, they bring down over there several other poskim as well, besides those two, that they say in Siman Lamed Daled, in Shulchan Aruch, they say over there that if there is a minyan where they don't put Rabbenu Tam, over there you're not allowed to put Rabbenu Tam. That's what they say, right? And they say that even applies when some of the people put it, meaning what? A minority of the people put it. You're still not allowed to do it. Unless you have like 10 people, minyan or whatever. They don't say exactly minyan, but that's probably the idea. The idea is that if once you have like a group of people, a significant group, not a minority, so then you're allowed to do it. But if it's just like 2-3 guys putting it, and there's 50 people don't put it, that's not considered to be anything.
So they're transgressing halakha, though.
Yeah, that's called yuhara, right? It's gava, it's arrogance, So therefore, comes and says the Mishnah Bura and the Beratev, you're not allowed to do like that. In a place where they don't put it, you're not allowed to put it. And by the way, they're saying basically the same thing as Maran. Because Maran said, right, only a person who's known to be very God-fearing can do that. Why is that? Because it's your show being a show-off.
So what if you're very God-fearing?
You have to be known for that. Not because you think you are. Other people have to think you are, right? That's not you. You cannot judge yourself.
Basically, you're not showing off because you're God-fearing.
They know that that's what you are.
You're doing it for God.
Not because you know, because they have to know.
Right, you're doing it not to show off. You're doing it because you have to do it.
Right, exactly. So now things like this, right? That because of all this, of all these issues, so what happens is that basically a person today, right? As we said, if he's in Eretz Israel, so over there, usually in most places, in the Sephardi minyanim, they put Rabbenu Tam, and also many Hasidim. They also put a lot of Hasidim.
Right.
In the Lithuanian, most of them, 99% of them do not put. So yeah. So now the issue, right? That issue in itself, right? As we said, that basically if you're putting on two together, you're basically doing, some problematic issues you're getting into, right? All kinds of question marks. Right. Number one, right? Are you going over the line of the tefillin, right? Because it's only about 8 centimeters you have there, basically. If you go over that, the second part of the bicep, right? So that's no good.
What if it's 4 and 4?
I'm sorry, 4 and 4. What does that mean?
4, 8 centimeters.
Yeah, but it's okay. So that's exactly the point, right? Yeah, exactly. So then once you make them too small, it's the other issues that come up, right? Because they're flimsy and because they're not written properly, because they could crack, all kinds of stuff. You have to make them very thin. This and that and this. So what happens is like this, right? Basically, what you're doing is that when you put Rashi and Rabbenu Tam together, it could be that the Rashi, because Rashi is supposed to be on top of Rabbenu Tam. You know what I mean? Like this, right? So therefore, it could be that the Rashi is too high, and therefore you're not doing the mitzvah of Rashi, which is the main mitzvah, right? We said the custom is like Rashi. So you're doing Rabbenu Tam, okay, maybe, and Rashi you're not even doing, right? Because it's too high. So therefore, it comes out you're losing a lot more than you think you're gaining. You know what I mean?
Right.
And this is the reason why the Rabbi told us, right? Don't do it this way. He told us many times, and he also wrote it in his Chuvot, right? Yechavadat and Yebiomer. He wrote many times, again and again. Same thing. Do not put both of them together. And there are some stubborn people who still want to do it this way. God bless them. What can I tell you? When they go to Shemaim, they're going to have to, explain their position. I don't know what to tell you, right? So, but the truth is, right, that even the ones, as you mentioned before, you wanted to get into this before, but I want to save it for last.
Right.
So, well, what's the thing, right? That we said that even the ones who do it this way, because they believe in the words of the Ben Ish Chai, they believe in the words of the Arizal, but the bottom line is that what? That even those big rabbis, when they go to a place where they don't do it over there. Why? Because they know that it's not allowed to do it this way. Well, because also like gava, it's arrogance, also arrogance. Right. Why are you being so holy in a place where not so holy like you? Or the truth is, right, that they can even call you a sinner. Because you're going on, because you're doing the things which are against the poskim. Right. So, why you want to be this way? Why you make machloket? Big problems. Think you're a hotshot, think you're holy, think you're this, a saint, whatever. Why? What do you know all this for? So therefore, right there, I can tell you just 2, examples. One of them actually you already know, but when Rabbi Safi, who used to put also both of them together, he's still alive. So when he used to come to our yeshiva in Chavadat, he used to pray with us. He wouldn't put them because he knew that we didn't do that. So therefore, when he came to us, only one, right? Oh, wow, Rabbi, what happened to you? You changed, right? You became a different person. What happened? You're not Ben Ish Chai guy anymore. And so there's
respect for the Rabbi, right?
Yeah, because our respect for the Binyan, that we don't do that. The Rabbi wasn't there. The Rabbi was praying in his house and something else. But that's the way it was. So Rabbi Safi also understood this. The concept of yuhara, that a person who does something which everybody else doesn't do, you look like you're a hotshot. There's a prohibition about that.
Right.
What is he? By the way, what is he liable to if a person does that? Excommunication, right? Our friend talks about that, right? So the nidui, they put him in nidui.
Sure.
Where does this come from? There's a Gemara.
Okay.
Right. So what happens over there? It says, right, that Rabbi Nasi and Rabbi Chia were walking together one day, and there was also some Talmid over there, and he was a Talmid of Rabbi Chia. So what happened was that they were walking together. They were walking on the regular path, and this guy, this Talmid was jumping around like, what does that mean? That it was very rainy at that time. So there was a lot of puddles and swamps and all kinds of things like this. So what happened was that he was going in the area where there's puddles and jumping over, like, trying to be like, Mr. Acrobat. The acrobat, right. Jumping here, jumping there. And these 2 rabbis are walking like regular, on the sidewalk, whatever. So looks at Rabbi Nasi, and this guy, his name was, I think, Yudah ben Nicosia. If I remember correctly, that's his name. So what happens is that Rabbi Nasi looks at him. He's jumping around like a frog in the water over there. Looks at him and says, "What's going on here? What is this?" So he tells Rabbi Chia. He says, "Who is this guy that's doing this in front of us? Oh, he lost his mind? What's going on over here?"
You can't play games.
So what was the reason why he was doing this? You know why? Because that area that they were walking on was private property. So he wanted to be like a big chassid and show, I don't walk on private property, I don't trespass. But the rule was that you're allowed to do that, right? Because of the road. Right, exactly. So you're allowed to do that. There was one of the stipulations that Rabbi Yoshua bin Nun did when he came into the land. Okay. That you're allowed to do that. So this guy, wants to be like a chassid, not to rely on that. I don't walk on private property, I don't trespass. I'm more holy than... So Rabbi Yehuda he's looking at this guy and says, he wants to show himself holier than us, he's your Talmid.
Right.
He says, he says, you know what I'm going to do with this guy? I'm going to excommunicate him. That's what he told, to Rabbi Chia. So Rabbi Chia answers Rabbi Yehuda he says, no, he says, don't worry about this guy. He says, he's my Talmid. He's known to be very holy, this guy. He's like a Baba Sali type, whatever. So he says, this guy is very holy. He's a very special person. Don't mind him, He doesn't mean to be, he doesn't want to show off. He's really, really very holy man. Whatever. So he's like a Baba Sali guy. So
he's sick for those things.
So Rabbi Yehuda tells him, he says, it's a good thing you told me that. If you didn't, he said, I would have chopped off his legs. What does that mean? I would have put him in nidui. I would have excommunicated. Yeah, but it means a nidui. Rashi explains over there, right? It's talking about nidui. I would have put him in nidui. What is this business?
Around.
He's trying to show in front of us that he's holy, in front of the Gedolei Ador, the big rabbis of the generation. This is a very terrible thing to do. So therefore, right, this is the source that we have from the Gemara, that a person is not allowed to do this kind of thing.
Right.
By the way, this also brought down regarding wearing white on Shabbat, that there are some people who like to go to Kabbalah and wear all white, everything. The suit is white, the hat is white, the shoes are white, and everything is white, and everybody else is wearing like blue and black, and this guy's coming in. So the Rabbenu Tam, he also says, man, in his book Chazon Ovadia, the first volume, that this also is not allowed to do because of this reason. You're doing like you are, trying to be like holier than everybody else. All the big rabbis are wearing black and blue, and you're wearing, white, Mr. Snowman, what is this business?
It's a problem.
Right? Yeah, it's also a problem. Same issue.
It's also a problem?
Oh, that we have to get to later on. Maybe we'll do a lecture on that also, right? So, because of that, the rabbi writes that you're not allowed to do that. In a place where they don't wear white on Shabbat like that, They look like the tooth fairy. What is this business, Wear dress like everybody else. Why are you trying to be above everybody? So therefore the rabbi said, right, that not allowed to do that. So what do we see from there? That this is actually a very real concept. That a person who does this kind of stuff is liable to excommunication. It's only by Isur the Rabbanan. It's only rabbinical.
Right.
But the rabbis were very strict about that.
Right.
They didn't play around with these kind of things. So what does that mean, Rabbi? What that means is that now we understand, right, that a person who does these kinds of things, if he wants to put Rabbenu Tam, he wants to be good, Baruch Hashem, it's very recommended to put Rabbenu Tam, but in the right place at the right time,
Marriage, you said, right?
You know what I mean? Yeah, that's also we have to discuss, right? The good thing you reminded me. But it has to be the right place at the right time. What does that mean? If you're praying a minyan that does it, so do it. A lot of people do it there. If only nobody does it, or just one or two people do it, don't do it there. Don't be a hotshot. You're not allowed to do that. Whatever you think you're gaining, you're losing, right? That's whatever you think you're gaining, it's going also to loss, right. more to loss. So what's the solution? By the way, I can give you another solution, right? What the Rabbi told us, he told us that there's also a solution like this, right? That if a person wants to put both tefillin in a place where they don't,
right?
So he says what he can do is like this, right? Take off the Rashi, go out and pretend like he's going to the bathroom or something, going to make a phone call, whatever, and then come back in and put the Rabbenu Tam. This way they won't notice, right? They just think he's putting the tefillin on back.
Right.
So if a person wants to do it that way, he has what to rely on because they're not going to really notice it so much that he puts both.
Does it look different?
Only when you get really, really close you can tell. If you're like like me and you, you cannot really see it. So therefore, right, there's no issue regarding that. So therefore, the best thing to do is like this, right? As we said, if you're going to a minyan where they're putting it, okay, so put it, and I'm very happy for you, right? Recommended, as we said, right? The recommended way is one after the other, not both together, because there you're getting into all kinds of issues, all kinds of problems. It's a big headache. Mm-hmm. Also, the Rabbi told us, Shalom, that the big Mekubal, the generation, one of the big Mekubal generation was Rabbi Ephraim HaKohen, was in Prat Yosef, right? In the Yeshiva Prat Yosef. He also agreed with him when he told him this, right? This theory that he had about putting them one after the other. He agreed, even though he was a Mekubal. He said this is the right way to do it in our generation.
Because the biggest one in the generation?
Yeah, Rabbi Ephraim HaKohen, right. So he also agreed that this is the way to do it because, in our generation, just to do it the way of the Arizal says, is not, it's just too risky. Not really realistic. It's not realistic at all to do it this way in our generation. So therefore he also agreed with the rabbi that that's the way it should be done, one after the other, not to both of them together, even though he's a Mekubal, he was a great Mekubal. But nevertheless, he also had a brain in his head, there are people who think they're Mekubal, but they have no brains, so what can I do, As I used to tell people, it's better to put one tefillin and have one brain, and instead of putting two tefillin, have no brains. It's 1 and 1 is better than 2 and 0. It comes out to the same. You have to have some brains also. You have to use some brain power. So therefore, the proper thing to do is like this, as we said. So regarding what you asked about, you asked about the issue of the married and not married and all this, right? So the custom of Sfardim is brought down in the books. That's what the rabbi told us several times. You can see also in the book of Halacha Bura, he says over there. He says there that the custom of the Sfardim is what? That they put the Tefillin of Rabbenu Tam only after they get married.
Why?
So what's the reason for this? Because they're afraid of Hirurim. What does that mean? That usually the ones who are not married have problems with bad thoughts, dirty thoughts, whatever, whatever. So because of that, since the Tefillin Rabbenu Tam is very holy, we're afraid of that. So we tell them, listen, wait till you get married, because you may lose more than you gain. That by doing this. So therefore, don't put Rabbenu Tam until you get married. Once you get married and you start to calm down, your thoughts start to become more pure, more rational, more simple, whatever. So then you can put Rabbenu Tam and everything will be good, right? You have plenty of time to do that. No rush, right? The truth is that the rabbi, not only he said this, but he also did that. What does that mean? That Rabbi Tzchak, his son, the chief rabbi, he told us that that's what the rabbi used to do. When we used to get married, what was the wedding gift? Rabbenu Tam used to give us, right? That was a gift. So that means that what? That practically speaking also, the rabbi was giving them Rabbenu Tam only when they got married. Before they got married, they were not putting Rabbenu Tam.
Right.
So this is the custom. Even though, by the way, he writes in the book Alichot Olam, it's one of his books, that there's no prohibition to put it on, even though if you're single.
It's better that way.
Right, but the custom is like that. Because of this, the reason that we said, right? Because of the thoughts, the Hirurim, the bad thoughts, God forbid, whatever. So because of that, even though there's no prohibition, technically speaking, yeah, according to the Kabbalah, it's on a higher level.
Why?
Because it has more benefit to it. It gives more benefit to the thinking, to the mind, it's more purification. That's why they say, by the way, that if you have one bag and you've got to put one on top of the other, you should put Rabbenu Tam on top of the Rashi. Because it's more holy.
I see.
So anyway, getting back to what we said, right, that since there's no rush to put it on so much and so forth and so on, it's only a chumrah anyway, it's only just a stringency. Right. So therefore, according to the Sephardi custom, a person should do right only after he gets married. Even though there's no prohibition to do before, but the custom is not like that. So you should follow the custom, unless, I don't know, a person, there are people, try to do everything extra, right. They want to look like they want to be very holy, they're very whatever, and they're the ones who are the biggest sinners, by the way, these people, The ones who are trying to look the most holy, they're the ones who are the biggest sins, but they try to compensate for their sins by doing all kinds of chumras, and they think that's going to save them. It's not going to save them. It's better to do just the halacha and stay away from doing all kinds of sins. So anyway, the point is that, but the Hasidim, the truth is, right, the Hasidim are not like that. The Hasidim, in their communities, also the younger boys put them on as well, Yeah, they don't have this custom like we do. Right. So the truth is, they definitely have what to rely on, as we said, right? There is no prohibition, but since our custom is that way, so the proper thing is to do it this way, right? And if you're going to tell me, oh, you're so holy, so let me ask you a question: are you more holy than the sons of Ovadia? The chief rabbi, Yitzchak Yosef, he never did that. So you think you're better than him? Okay, if you think so, I can't tell you. We have to give a lecture on that, maybe, right? To know your place. The person has to know who he is and what he is. Baruch Adonai le'olam amen. Chazak u'baruch.
Thank you.
Okay.